BionicDance is filmed in front of a live studio audience.
Can atheism account for morality? The answer to this question is no, it cannot.
Well, of course the answer is no. If atheism could account for morality, you might have to face this scary notion of a world that isn't perfect. Let's do this. Greetings, fellow space travelers. BionicDance here. The second most vexing part of religious philosophy, just short of the requirement of faith, is religious morality. Well, for me at least. Frankly, theistic notions of morality seem, well, childish. Immature. Incidentally, sorry for the glare before, but the kitten loves looking at outside, and I wasn't going to deprive her just for you jokers.
Because atheism is a rejection of God or any deity's existence, there is no objective moral standard which atheists can hold to.
Atheism comes in many forms, and rejection is just one of them. Theists always make this huge deal about atheism not having an objective standard, as if that somehow makes any kind of difference to whether morality can exist or be considered valid.
The closest thing an atheist can come to is a set of subjective standards, that is, standards that are held to be good only according to a group's or individual's opinion. In other words, what one atheist believes to be morally indecent could actually be considered decent to another atheist, because it all depends on their thoughts, feelings, circumstances, or the society they live in.
And, okay, that describes a world that is ripe for disagreement and controversy. Well, have you looked at the world lately? People haven't exactly been getting along. You can't tell me that isn't at least a little bit about them disagreeing on how folks should behave.
In addition, an atheist's moral values or beliefs might change over time, depending on their life experiences.
I say again, and how can that not be considered a good thing? Surely you've known someone who was a total jerkwad, but over the course of their life realized that and decided to start playing nice with the other kids. Their life experience taught them that everybody's life was improved by being less of a dick. And what is morality, if not a system for making our world a better place to live?
This means that in atheism, nothing is inherently good or evil, because everything in this universe, according to them, purely originated from physical matter and chemical reactions, things which cannot account for morality in any way.
Really? Why not?
We have simply been conditioned to call certain things good or evil due to things like evolution, the culture we were brought up in, religious traditions, and because making that distinction helps communities survive.
So we actually can account for morality then, just not the way this guy wants to.
Christianity, however, provides us with objective moral standards, standards which are universally true for all people and times, because God Himself is the standard.
Problem: Christianity doesn't provide you with objective morality. Christianity claims it does that. Problem: God being the standard doesn't make morality objective. To be objective, something has to be so, even if every thinking, feeling being ceases to exist. If all life in the universe was wiped out, so too would be emotion, perspective, opinion, and morality. Even God's morality is subjective. Lately, people like Billy Lane Craig have been trotting out this argument that God is good. He's made of goodness. That God's morality is made of pure goodnicity. He's gooditude personified, thus making God's morality objective. Problem: even if that's true, prove God exists. Problem: show us what good is. What's your basis for comparison?
Unlike in atheism, in Christianity we can truly know what good and evil is by looking at God's nature, which is revealed in the Bible.
So you truly believe because a book told you. Why do you believe that book over the plethora of other religious texts out there? Or any book for that matter? If you truly know what's moral and immoral, why are there so many different denominations of Christianity and lots of other religions? And why don't they all get along? You can claim to know for certain, but you don't really, do you?
Whatever is in accordance with God's nature is good, and whatever deviates from His nature is evil. For example, God forbids murder, stealing, coveting, and worshipping other gods in His 10 Commandments.
And why do we need a God for any of that? Maybe I'm putting too much faith, so to speak, in humanity, but I think we can figure out that sort of stuff all on our own, no God required.
In addition, because God is unchanging, A Christian's moral values will never change over time or depend on the society they live in, because it will always be based upon God's forever unchanging word.
Have you even read your own book? Old Testament God and New Testament God are pretty different people. One of them is rather grouchier than the other, to say the least, and tolerates, even performs things with which the other would be appalled.
So why is this important? Because if there is no objective standard that governs between right and wrong, then it's impossible to distinguish between good and evil. Since there is nothing objective or absolute by which that distinction can even be made.
Oh, I'd even go so far as to say that good and evil, as used in this specific context, don't even exist. So?
In other words, in atheism, the line between good and evil is non-existent, or it's significantly blurred at least. For example, from an atheistic perspective, it's impossible to truly call men such as Joseph Stalin or Mao Zedong truly evil, because they can only point to a subjective standard for that.
Big, fat, hairy deal. A subjective standard is all we need to tell whether something hurts enough to be unacceptable. Sure, people aren't going to agree on what's acceptable and what's not. Or why. I don't think this guy, indeed most theists, have ever considered or could ever accept the possibility that that's just tough noogies.
If there is no objective standard that governs between right and wrong, then it's perfectly permissible for an atheist to conveniently switch moral standards or values anytime depending on the situation. After all, if atheists want to prolong their lives as long as possible because they only live once, what guiding principle is there to stop them from stealing from a shop or robbing the neighbour's house in times during a crisis, for instance?
Do you really need God to not be a dick? Because if so, that makes the atheist the better person, because they're being nice all on their own. And they are being nice, because everybody's lives are better for it, not because some God says so. Sure, there are atheists who aren't exactly model citizens, but there are plenty of theists who aren't either. You can't point to someone like Stalin without also pointing at the Crusades, or the Inquisition, or 9/11. And do we need to point out how many Christians are in prison versus the number of atheists? This ratio is far lower than the total percentage of the population as a whole. So it would seem that God isn't much of a moral deterrent, while being an atheist seems to get one into rather less trouble.
In an atheistic worldview, many people have gotten away with doing evil deeds and dying unpunished. For Christians, however, the "it's not a crime unless you're caught" mentality is completely not permissible, because we know that God sees and hears whatever we do in secret in our thoughts, words, and deeds. We also know that no one goes unpunished, because God holds all people accountable for their lives after we die and punishes all evildoers accordingly.
And this is where we come to the real issue. Because what I see when I talk to Christians in particular is that they don't just want a moral standard, they want guarantees. A life lived in uncertainty is unacceptable. The origin of life in the universe cannot be unknown. God's existence must be believed, and wrongdoers must be punished somehow. When they say these things, directly or by implication, what I'm hearing is a child's cry of, "It's not fair! It needs to be fair! God makes it fair." They sound like children calling out for a parent to protect them. But if you look around at the world, it's pretty clear that life doesn't work that way. Have you ever seen the movie Labyrinth? If not, what the hell's wrong with you? Go correct that oversight immediately. I'll wait. I guarantee you won't be sorry. There's this one snippet that I think sums up this whole matter beautifully.
It's not fair!
No, it isn't. But that's the way it is.
Therefore, it should be obvious by now that the atheistic worldview is highly problematic, in that it fails completely to account for morality, at least for objective morality.
At least he made that distinction. Most theists don't. The problem is they can't account for objective morality either. They can only make unfalsifiable claims.
In light of this, I'd like to invite atheists to at least consider the possibility of God's existence, the almighty being who is the standard for all morality.
People can be pretty shitty. You should join our club of those who believe in something we can't prove is real, because it makes us all less shitty, even though it obviously doesn't work for a lot of people.
I think that being open to his existence is much more honest than the atheistic worldview, which completely denies it.
So I take it you've considered every other god out there before deciding that Christianity was the one, right? And what makes you think that I haven't considered your god? Or is the idea that anybody who gives your religion a chance will become a Christian? What's more honest is living your life as if it's a stage and you have no script. It's all improv. You have to do the best you can with what you've got. Atheism isn't a license to just go hog wild, stomping your way through the world the way you seem to like to think. I dare you to try that and see how far you can get before people stop putting up with your shit. Even without getting your moral guarantees, an entirely secular world can be a moral one. Until next time, fellow space travelers, this is BionicDance saying don't run on automatic. Instead, please think.
Even YouTubers need Ferraris. Please donate on Patreon.
Ignorance killed the cat. Curiosity was framed.